What is going on, gunfighters? The 6.5 Creedmoor, people love it, people hate it, people love to hate it, people love to love it. It's a contentious little cartridge. I actually was reluctant to get a 6.5 Creedmoor, but I actually really like the 6.5 Creedmoor. But here's the thing. I think a lot of the people like or dislike the 6.5 Creedmoor is based on emotion. And I've done a whole episode on the 6.5 Creedmoor, and I've done a whole episodes on comparing it to other cartridges. So this is not really a nerd out ballistics thing. This is more a gun culture psychology deep dive into our psyche as gun guys. I think it reveals more about us than it does about the 6.5 Creedmoor. Here's the thing. I think a lot of the reason people like the 6.5 Creedmoor is they think it's going to turn them into a super sniper, which is not true. And a lot of the reasons people dislike the 6.5 Creedmoor is the people that think that it makes them a sniper because they bought a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's like me buying a Fender Stratocaster and thinking that I'm Jimi Hendrix. It doesn't work like that. So that I think that's a lot of it. And another reason, if you are a hater of it, I would submit this to you. If you hate the 6.5 Creedmoor, do you hate it based on ballistics? Because let me ask you this question. Riddle me this. Do you like the 6.5 by 55 Swede? Do you like the 260 Remington? Do you like the 25-06? Do you like the 270? Now, I was even surprised at this. I did an entire episode comparing, and I wasn't expecting these results, but I did a whole episode comparing the 6.5 Creedmoor to the 270. It is startlingly hard to find a difference. Similar bullet weights, similar velocity, similar energies. So if you prefer the 270, that's fine. I'm not telling you should switch to the 6.5 Creedmoor. But what I'm saying is if you think the 270 is a good round, throwing 130, 140 grain bullets at X velocity, you can't sit there and crap on the 6.5 Creedmoor and say, oh, but the 6.5 Creedmoor, is for prepubescent girls. It just doesn't make any sense logically. If you think the 270 is good, which I would argue that it is, then based on the numbers of ballistics and math, you can't say, oh, well, the 6.5 Creedmoor is horrible for medium to large game. It's not. Now, again, it doesn't make you a super sniper. I don't think anybody should be ethically, unless it's a survival situation, out, lobbing rounds at deer or elk at, 6, 7, 800 yards, just because you can't cheat math and time of flight is a thing. I've talked about that before. But at reasonable ranges, if you would take the shot with a 270, assuming you have similar bullet construction, which that's another thing I should probably talk about. But assuming you have similar bullet construction, let's say you got, 130 grain. I don't even know if they make this bullet. It's not my load. But assuming you're launching, 130 grain nozzle or AccuBond out of both, how are you going to look me in the face and tell me that the 270 is okay at 300 yards on a deer or an elk? The 6.5 Creedmoor is not. It just doesn't make logical sense. You can't tell me that there's a little bit of differences, frontal diameter, a little bit difference in bullet velocity is actually going to make that much of a difference. I would not believe it. I've shot enough living animals to know that the difference in that little difference in velocity is going to make any difference at all. The other thing is bullet construction. I think this might be, and this is not the fault of the caliber, right? This is the fault of people not doing their research. You look at something like a 30-30 or a 270, that's a hunting cartridge, right? It was, you can obviously use them for defense or for something else, but their bread and butter is hunting. They're primarily a hunting cartridge. So, John Q. Public that goes and buys a box of ammo at Cabela's or Sportsman's or whatever your big box store is, Shields, right? I'm not brand loyal. I'm not sponsored by anybody. Midway USA, right? If you go out and buy a box of ammo for your 270, it was probably designed for hunting. The 6.5 Creed, on the other hand, it was primarily designed for target shooting. So there's a good chance if John Q. Public has no idea what he's doing and he goes out and buys a box of ammunition, even if it says hollow point, because he thinks, ooh, hollow point, that's devastating. A lot of those hollow points are like hollow point match bullets. They were not designed for terminal performance. They were designed to be accurate. It's just the way that they draw the bullet, the cup and core bullet, it's very repeatable, and it just happens to have a hollow point, so it'll be, HP match, like hollow point match will be the designation. And I'll think, oh, hollow point. Well, if you shoot a deer with that, that's your freaking fault, right? That's your fault for not doing your research. You can't be like, oh, well, the 6.5 Creedmoor stinks because, I'm wounding these deer because I'm shooting them with a match bullet. That's your fault. And a lot of people will do that. And a lot of people do that on purpose because they're like, oh, but the Hornady ELD whatever, 140 whatever grain, it shoots such tiny groups. Okay, who cares? And it shoots tiny groups. So what? Would you rather have a gun that shoots .001 MOA with match ammo if you're hunting, or a gun that shoots 1 MOA? How egregious. Like, people would have fought for that gun that shoots 1 MOA 20 years ago. But it shoots 1 MOA with really good hunting ammo. But yet somebody will take the .001 MOA match ammo out hunting. Why? Just take the 1 MOA. That's 4 inches at 400 yards, the size of your fist. Stop being ridiculous with the accuracy. I love accuracy, but I like accuracy in like testing myself, not what a tiny group my gun can shoot off a bench. Because guess how many deer I've shot off a bench? 0 deer, right? So that's your fault if you ignorantly do it, or you willingly choose because this shoots a tiny group to shoot match ammo at a deer. That's your fault, right? That's not the 6.5 Creedmoor's fault. So don't be that guy, and also don't be the guy that thinks it turns you into a sniper. If you're a crappy shot with a 30-06 and you think now you have a 6.5 Creedmoor and you had trouble, hitting a deer at 200 yards with a 30-06, then now you're going to be able to go out and snipe deer at, extended ranges because you have a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's ridiculous. It doesn't work like that. That's like, I can't play the guitar and I have I don't even know. I'm not a musician, right? But you give me a crappy pawn shop guitar and I can't play, and I'm like, oh, I suck at playing the guitar, but once I get this brand new Fender Stratocaster or Les Paul, then I'm going to be a rock star. No, I probably need to practice, right, playing the guitar. I might get to a point where I'm so good with that pawn shop guitar that I would sound better with a Fender Stratocaster. But it's going to be a while. If I suck with the pawn shop guitar, I'm not going to be a rock star with the Fender Stratocaster. And obviously that makes sense, but so many people do that with guns. They think, it happens a lot with Magnums, which is not a 6.5 Creedmoor. People are like, oh, you know what? I'm wounding these deer with a 30-06 or a 243. I'm gonna get a 300 Win Mag. That's gonna solve my problem, dude. If you gut shoot a deer with a 300 Win Mag, it's still gonna run away. I don't care. I've seen it enough. I was a guide, and I think a lot of people that are bad shots, honestly, try to make up for it with Magnums, because I've seen more wounded deer, I think, honestly, with Magnums than regular calibers. And it's not because the Magnums are less effective, it's because the people can't shoot and they try and use it as a crutch. Just like a Magnum is not a crutch for your crappy shot placement or a buck fever. Sorry to pee in your Cheerios, but the 6.5 Creedmoor is not a crutch for you being able to shoot long range. It's just not. It's not how it works. Stop it with that. But also, it's not a bad caliber, right? If somebody thinks it turns them into a sniper and they're a crappy shot, that's not 6.5 Creedmoor's fault. That's got nothing to do with the caliber. So I think those are just some of the reasons why there's the love and the hate, and the haters that love to hate on it, and the lovers that love to love on it, and all the emotion on the 6.5 Creedmoor. And again, I think it says more about the psychology of gun culture in America than it does about the actual caliber of the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's just an interesting case study in the modern gun psychology. I should do one like this on suppressors. Oh, I'd make a lot of people angry. But anyway, I appreciate you guys listening. Maybe you disagree. Tell me why the 6.5 Creedmoor is the barely above a 22 long rifle, or tell me why it makes you a super sniper at 1,200 yards when you shoot once a year off a bench. Go ahead and let me know. Find a way to leave a comment. You're probably smart enough to figure out how to do that. With that, guys, I appreciate all that you do. If you want to support the podcast, consider becoming a patron. I just got, a bunch of And generally, there's a lot of content that comes out only for patrons. I just did scheduling, so there's a lot of content coming up just for patrons that you're just not going to get. And I'm a little bit more real sometimes, a little bit more raw in the Patreon episodes. So if that appeals to you, consider becoming a patron. If you want to support the show, right? All the buzzwords, baby. Gluten-free. Sustainable. Small business. America. Veteran-owned and operated. Soy-free. All the buzzwords, right? Consider supporting. Become a patron. With that, your tactical tip of the day. You don't need to go out, if we're talking about hunting, you don't need to go out and spend a bunch of coin on these cover scents or whatever. It just makes sense that whatever smells in your area that you're not objectionable to, or your people that you live with are not objectionable to use as a cover scent. Like, I have a dry bag, for wet environments that I keep my hunting clothes in. I got a little bag. It was, I don't know, some bag that came with some package, like a mesh bag. I just happen to have it. It could be a fabric bag. It could be an old sock that's clean, obviously. But I'm looking at sage right now. Throw some sage in there, right? If you're in the East Coast, on the East Coast, right? Throw some pine shats in there. Put it in the clean old sock, the one you have one sock of or whatever, and throw that in your bag. Right? And wash your clothes with rainwater or well water and baking soda. You don't need to go spend all this Gucci stuff for the scent control. That'll work just fine. So just a tactical tip there to save you some money, and actually maybe better because it'll be what's from your environment. So if you're out in the sagebrush, smelling like that sage in that area is probably a good idea. You're trying to sneak up on an antelope or whatever quarry is in your area, right? So with that, your tactical verse of the day. The first part of Psalm 91. I will say to the Lord, you are my refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I will trust. Surely you shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. Psalm 91 is one of the more well-known, and it's a beautiful psalm. But the snare of the fowler, right? That was it must have been a common known thing probably to be used in a psalm, right? I'm just deducing that. But if you give that as like a reference, people will probably understand in that culture that that's a thing, like the snare of the fowler. They were out trapping. They were out getting meat. Men, think about that. Can you put meat on the table that doesn't just come from the store? Just some food for thought there in your tactical verse of the day. From the snare of the fowler. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.